Hey, y'all, what's up, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis. Psyched to be here, where we bring you really good, sound relationship advice from lots and lots of different people that hopefully you hear this, and especially if you do the action steps, something shifts in your life. And I know a lot of you write in and tell me that, which is so cool. So thanks again for your reviews. Thanks for your care, your kindness. It's awesome. You guys rock. Couldn't do it without you, right? Okay, good one from Bryce and Jenny. Thanks, guys. I've listened to quite a few episodes, and I'm continually blown away by the caliber of guests that Jason brings on and his ability to offer solutions to real issues. The Relationship School has helped me greatly in my life and marriage. Thanks, you too. I'm sending you to love right now. You guys are awesome. And yeah, you can leave us a review with a flick of a thumb and a few digits on your phone if you're getting value here, right? That means a lot to us, helps us reach more folks. Okay. I'm a little more active, folks, on Instagram lately, and I want to encourage you to follow me there, at Jason Gaddis. That's Jason with a Y. Been putting more videos up and some fun quotes, etc. So please send me a message through Instagram if you want. At Jason Gaddis. Okay, in this episode, I've got an attachment person who is very non-traditional. Most of the attachment people you've heard on this podcast are, quote, experts or attachment scientists, people like Dan Siegel or Stan Tacken. And in this episode, we're veering off that to hear from a mom who got super involved in attachment science through her experience as a mother. And I found her through my friend Kimberly, who introduced us. Kimberly's been on the podcast before. And I thought it would be really cool to have this woman, Bethany Saltman, on the show to highlight, maybe even normalize how some of us think about attachment. I think you're going to find some of her own findings from her own experience and from doing the AAI adult attachment inventory, giving it to her mother. Just there was some really cool stuff that came out of her own experience that I think is useful in your life. So Bethany Saltman's an author, award-winning editor, and researcher. Her work's been seen in magazines such as The New Yorker, New York Magazine, Atlantic Monthly, Parents, and many others. We talk about her first book, which is called Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey into the Science of Attachment. And those of you attachment nerds like me recognize the term strange situation, which she'll unpack. She's a best-selling book coach. She's a communications director and a mindfulness mentor. She's a longtime Zen practitioner where she met her husband. She's married 20 years. She's got a daughter. She lives on the East Coast in New York. Anyway, cool woman. I'm psyched for you to listen. So let's get right into it and stay tuned to the end, as always, for your action step. Welcome to the show, Bethany Saltman.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, psyched to meet you and dive in with you.
Absolutely.
So I just introduced you with your sort of more formal bio, and I'd love to have you introduce yourself for the listener, just so they can orient to who is Bethany Saltman.
Sure. Who is Bethany Saltman? Well, in this context right now, I am a writer and an author and a mother. And my book is called Strange Situation, A Mother's Journey into the Science of Attachment. And I am that mother. I am a mother whose daughter is 14 years old right now. She's watching Friends and making herself some food after, Zoom school. But when she was born 14 years ago, I was really dismayed by my experience. I had been studying Zen, practicing Zen for a long time. I'd lived in a monastery. I met my husband in the monastery, and we left the monastery because I had some health issues, and it was a very rigorous life. Anybody who's lived in a Zen monastery knows it's the exact opposite of, quote, Zen. It's super intense and, lots going on there. But it was too rigorous. I was having some health issues. We left. We decided that we wanted to have a baby instead. We wanted to, get to the bottom of this life through becoming parents. And so that's what we did. And I was under the illusion, as many women are, that once that baby appeared in the world, I would be transformed, and I would be a different person. I would suddenly become the mother I wanted to be, magically. Um, in fact, the opposite happened. I became kind of more myself. And this was pretty upsetting. I was really disappointed to see that I didn't have better control over my feelings, over my reactivity, especially after being, a Zen practitioner all these years. And I was just like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? And how can I, what good is love? Because I loved my baby. I loved her so much. I had all those, what I call in the book, the squishy markers of affection. I thought she was adorable. I felt protective. I didn't have trouble, so-called bonding in that way. I felt very close to her and affectionate toward her, but I also lost my temper, was impatient, frustrated, resentful, and sometimes, just not having the best of times. And so I really started to wonder, like, well, why isn't love protecting me and her from these feelings? Like, what good is love if I am still acting like such what she called me one day in preschool, a mean animal? And so, I started to learn about attachment. At first, I learned about Dr. Sears and so-called attachment parenting when Azalea was a baby. And I quickly felt like this can't be right. Raising a child can't be about a checklist of behaviors that is so particular to a very particular type of person. But then I started to read about Mary Ainsworth and the strange situation and the science of attachment. And I quickly discerned that this was different from the Dr. Sears attachment world. And I was really intrigued, and I sort of fell for Mary Ainsworth, the pictures of her online, and just the way she looked and seemed and felt. She kind of reminded me of my grandmother. I really wanted to know her. She, of course, had died already, but I felt like she was sort of calling to me from the great beyond to teach me. And so I followed up on that and spent the next many years, 10 years essentially, teaching myself the science of attachment, traveling around the country, visiting labs, archives, trainings, and trying to understand what good love was. What was the function of love between a mother and a child? And why did I feel like myself? And was that okay?
Yeah. And when you say feel like myself, compared to some fantasy that you'd created about yourself?
Yeah,
Is that
some
what you mean?
idealized mother. Yeah, am I enough? Am I enough?
Got it. Because the idealized version of mother should be kind of have her shit together all the time, never get angry, love her child unconditionally, it just all goes well, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I compared myself to people who, and some people really do find it a more natural fit. And they really do delight in the experience of parenthood in a way that's really natural for them. I delighted in my daughter. I didn't necessarily delight in being her mother, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can you say a little more about that so I understand? When
Sure.
you mean like the role of mother, or what do you mean?
Like I loved her. I didn't know what it meant to be a mom. I was an intellectual. I am a poet, a writer. I was never one of those people who was interested in babies. And I thought that when she was born, I would somehow be like, oh, this is great. I'm totally into this. But in fact, I still had, oh, sorry about that. Um, I still had all of my same desires, same interests, same passions. And there was this adorable, but, needy as hell baby in my house. And I wasn't sure how to go about that. And I felt tremendously guilty and ashamed for having those feelings.
Yeah, I'm sure that's so common, right? For moms,
So
especially,
common
I mean, just so normal also and so common.
and so verboten.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And then, okay, so you went on this journey and you started studying Mary's Ainsworth's work. Who let's kind of back that up a little bit
Sure.
for the listeners who doesn't know about Ainsworth, Mary Ainsworth and John Bowlby, who are kind of famously attributed to sort of really beginning this whole attachment science and attachment theory. Will you unpack it just briefly for the listeners so we can get oriented?
Sure. So Bowlby and Ainsworth met in the 1950s in England. Bowlby is a psychiatrist. Mary was a developmental psychologist. He really began the theoretical understanding of how mothers and caregivers and babies need each other, need to be in close proximity in order for the babies to be protected. So those feelings that we have about wanting to be close to our babies has a biological purpose, which is to keep the babies close. And so love has a purpose. That's, as simply as attachment can be. That's what it means. Mary Ainsworth then got into the mix with him and started to look at how to see this attachment in real life. He was sort of the theoretical, and she was the one who was spearheading a lot of the research. So her first research was in Uganda in 1954, and then she replicated that study in Baltimore. And that Baltimore study, it was the benchmark of how we now understand attachment, and that's where the strange situation came in. She originally began looking at mothers and babies in the suburbs of Baltimore and observing them for like 72 hours total per family. And then she began to see these patterns of attachment: secure, insecure, or a secure attachment, and then two different kinds of insecure attachments: avoidant and resistant. And she saw that in the home. And then she wanted to study it more closely. And so she developed this procedure that happens in the laboratory, which is a series of comings and goings that kind of goose the baby's attachment system into being, so that she and her team could watch it and observe it. And what she found was that the attachment system comes most online during a reunion after having been separated from a caregiver. So whatever the baby does during the separation, sometimes they have big reactions, sometimes they don't have big reactions. But what you're looking for in that reunion, in the strange situation, is that the baby can return to however they were before the disruption. So, it sounds really simple. It's incredibly complex. It took me a long time to begin to discern how that happens in the strange situation through trainings and through, a lot of study. And I'm not a scholar. I haven't done this professionally. So I taught myself everything I know, and it's complicated. It's also really beautiful. I have an MFA in poetry. I'm a Zen person. The simplicity, it's like a poem. It's just it's a remarkably, efficient way of looking at something that's deep and nuanced.
Totally. And to pay attention to it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. And Mary Ainsworth is very cool.
Yeah, agreed. Completely. Like completely changed the field of how we think about infants and caregivers and how we bond. So
much so that we don't know it. We think that this is really basic stuff. But before Bowlby and Ainsworth came along, we didn't think love meant anything. We thought that babies would love whoever fed them.
Uh-huh. Right.
Which is just not the case.
I know. So, okay, so you went deep into this study, and then I'm so curious how it started to inform your opinions about parenting and also just your experience being a mother. What started to happen as you began to study?
Yeah, well, first it was really scary. It was like, wow, I don't know if I want to look this closely at these relationships. And it turns out Mary Ainsworth did not have children. And this was a great sorrow for her. But I always say I'm glad she didn't, because I don't think anybody who has children could look that closely without being triggered as hell. It's just so complicated and difficult, and you feel so guilty. So what started to happen for me was that I started to see that attachment is so much more forgiving and so much more wide open of a field than I ever could have imagined. So it was much more like the Dharma field of what I had been studying in Zen than anything that resembles Dr. Sears or any kind of parenting advice. The attachment system is like digestion or respiration. It's just something that we're born with. It happens. We just attach to the person who's closest to us because we have to. Now, that may not be the healthiest attachment, just like our digestion may not be the healthiest based on, the environment. And based on how we're born, our DNA, our karma, our temperament, so many things go into these systems, but attach we will. And like so much that we're learning about the body and the system, we orient toward resilience. We want that thing to work. And one of my favorite things when I studied The Strange Situation with Dr. Alan Struve at the University of Minnesota was we would talk about during the training for The Strange Situation, we'd watch all these videos, and he would always ask, is the relationship working? And what he meant by that was, does the baby know how to get their needs met with this parent? And it doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't have to be the way we might want it to, and those of us in this like parenting space, right? We've got like all the pictures of our kids on the wall. They're wearing X and Y. They're eating, certain things. We're limiting their screen time. We've got like, it's a whole sort of, very specific milieu that some of us live in, and attachment has absolutely nothing to do with that. 65% of people around the world, this number varies depending on who you ask, are considered securely attached. And so if we think about the diversity of the human experience, we can come to assume then that having a securely attached baby doesn't have to look like what you think it's going to look like in your mind. It certainly doesn't have to do with slings, nursing, co-sleeping, crying it out or not crying it out, all the things that the Sears world is super intense about. And I'm not saying that any of those things are good or bad, but they have absolutely nothing to do with a secure attachment.
Yeah.
A secure attachment comes from growing up in an environment that is sensitively attuned to you much of the time.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Let me come back to your 65% number. I've heard that too. I've heard it's even higher sometimes, depending on who I'm talking to. Do you buy that?
Do I what?
Do you buy that number?
Do I absolutely buy it.
So when you look around the world, you're seeing, just relationally, you're seeing 65% of the population is securely attached.
Yep.
Wow. I so don't see that.
I know. And so in answer to your question, what did I learn by studying attachment? I learned that it's not what I thought it was. It's not some safe haven feeling of like, I'm okay in the world. I belong, I'm good. I'm not insecure in sort of a garden variety way. It's a much deeper sense of, I can kind of, so if you look at adult attachment, which is understood through the instrument of the adult attachment interview, that's like the strange situation for adults. It's a very, particular hour-long interview that then gets transcribed verbatim and coded by experts. And I've done that training as well. And what the AAI is looking for in a secure transcript is simply that it's a valuing of attachment. That's all. Meaning that the person who was speaking in the interview has an orientation to value relationships.
Yeah, got it.
And that they have the coherence of mind to be able to tell a story of their past, to have some sense of why their parents behaved the way that they did, whether it was positive or negative, and that they have some understanding of who they are in the context of their early relationships.
Yeah.
So,
which is the hallmark of a secure attachment, by the way.
That's exactly right.
That ability to tell a coherent narrative about one's life, right, as a parent.
Right, but for those of us who are particularly, in deep in this world, our version of coherence might be different from what a garden variety securely attached person who's not like super educated or doesn't read a lot or doesn't care about attachment per se, and it's just sort of living their life, voting for Trump. They don't care, build a wall. Like, those things, like a secure attachment actually does tend to lead in a less authoritarian, more, I don't know if liberal is the right word, but less authoritarian uh, politics. But, secure attachment has to do more with your inner family, your relationships to your children and your parents and your grandparents and your cousins. And, it has less to do with a kind of personality that a lot of us might think is going to be indicated with our attachment security. It's a much more bedrock aspect of humanity.
Yeah, cool. And I think there's a few things I want to say here. One is that it can be seductive to try to pin it down, right? And to put it in these little categories and boxes, and secure, insecure, and all the little avoidance and whatever the labels we put on them. And I liked just the reminder that you said it's more like Zen, where there can be actually this spacious frame around attachment, which, I'm a former Buddhist practitioner, so I can connect with that.
Former, that's interesting. I'd like to hear that story.
Yeah. Well, like formally, it absolutely informs my life and every day how I see the world and how I live my life. But
yeah,
not a like in a Sangha kind of practicing Buddhist.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Anyway, the sort of spaciousness, I'm appreciating your holding with it, and even the ambiguity here of like, well, wait, hold on, what are we talking about? So can we ground it a little bit with how this started to show up with your daughter?
Sure. Yeah. And I understand it can sound a little ephemeral, but what we're looking at is an ability for somebody, when you're young, securely attached people tend to be better in social situations. They tend to be able to, and this is setting aside temperament too, because some people are shy, some people are introverted, some people are extroverted. But the way I often like to talk about it is that a securely attached person kind of knows how to get their bread buttered. So like if you're a really shy person and you don't like speaking up in class or at work or in these kind of relational experiences, a securely attached person is going to have a tendency to believe that they have, more of a, they have more energy. They feel safer to reach out in a way that feels comfortable for them. And that's an incredibly that's a success-driven trait to have. A securely attached person overall is going to feel more at ease in relational situations.
And are you saying that the shy person, even the shy person who's securely attached, can still find a way to get their bread buttered?
Exactly. And the bread buttered is always just a really basic feeling of relational safety.
Mm-hmm. So I feel okay advocating for myself. I can go to that person who I don't know very well, and I can still ask for what I need. Or
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. It's not always going to be easy, but it's just sort of an orientation. I keep using that word because it's all about time, place, position, and degree. It's so hard to pin it down because everybody's so different, and in different contexts, it's going to look really differently. With that said, a securely attached baby can use the parent to settle themselves. That's what the strange situation is looking at. So if you take that as the metaphor for, through the lifespan, when the child is in school and the parent's not there, they're probably going to be better at using the teacher to help them find their way. When they're a teenager and their peers are really important, they're probably chosen pretty good friends, and friends who are not going to betray them, and friends that they can trust. And they're probably going to be better at asking their friends for help when they need help. And then when they get their first jobs, they're going to be able to feel safe enough with their boss to be able to say, I don't really understand this and I'm sorry. And and it doesn't mean that there's not going to be suffering. As a Buddhist, like life is suffering. We're all going to experience that pain. But having a secure attachment just gives you a leg up in feeling like the world kind of has my back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like a fundamental goodness, right? Or something that like, I'm okay here.
I'm okay enough here. Because then I think the reason why I'm really trying to get nuanced about that is your question, do I buy the 65%? The answer is yes, because I don't expect a whole lot from a secure attachment. It's like the world in a sense, but there's an awful lot of pain that is still going to come in our way.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know.
Hey, quick interruption from yours truly. We have a workshop coming up, relationshipschool.com/connected. And this is all about conflict, guys. If you want to learn how to work through conflict better, please come to this workshop. Check it out. Here's what Julia, all the way from the UK, had to say.
First of all, I'm just amazed how the whole kind of event went online, because I've been to face-to-face event in the past. I was a bit anxious thinking how it's going to be online, but actually the value it's the same. What you're getting is the same, and more than anything, actually, it saves you on time and travel. Because you can do it in the comfort of your own home and fit in with your busy life. So actually it was very beneficial to me in that way. And I've learned so much already, something that I never thought I'll pick up from this course. And it just made me feel really released and really at ease where I'm heading in my relationship, in my life. And if you're thinking, well, shall I join or not? I urge you to do, because your life will change and your perspective will change and everything around you as well. And, I wish everyone, before you're getting married, before you're getting into a relationship, I wish this course will be mandatory to complete, because your life could be so much easier and so much less aggravation and conflict and argument if you do know the tools, you understand how people operate. It just, will help you really, to have a more fulfilled and happy life.
All right. Julia had an awesome experience. Thanks again, Julia. Go to relationshipschool.com/connected if you want to register. It's not too late. All right. Back to the podcast. Okay. So let's come back to you and your daughter. What in your relationship, as you studied this stuff, I can only imagine that it started to inform your parenting and what you started to do with your daughter and how she responded. So can you give us a peek into that?
Sure. I mean, so in the book, I tell the story of getting my adult attachment interview done, and learning about myself and what kind of, my big question was, what kind of mother am I? And I found out, and the news really surprised me. And what ended up happening was that I realized that, even though I had always thought of myself as a poster child for insecurity, I was a juvenile delinquent. She's in the other room. I'm going to be quiet. I was very, risk taking is a polite term for myself as a youngster. I had really extreme relationships as a young adult. I struggled. I suffered a lot.
And we could say that you grew up then in an insecurely attached system.
Would imagine.
Yeah.
But then the news that I got when I, had my own adult attachment interview done really countered that. And it blew my mind. And so I ended up looking back at my whole life. I mean, talk about like seeing my life flash before me. I had to re-understand everything that I had been going through, because I just assumed at the beginning of this journey that I would be the most insecure of anybody. And that's why I was such a bad kid all along. That's why I was such a bad mom. That's why I was, and then to discover, I spent all those years developing trust in the science of attachment and in Mary Ainsworth. And so when I got my results, I trusted it, and then, so I had no choice but to look back and say, whoa, this is not what I thought I was. And so, it's taken me a long time to really discern. So in terms of Azalea, my relationship with her, this comes and goes, of course, but generally I felt like, whew, okay. If I'm okay, then, there's a lot more space in this than I ever could have imagined. And moving forward, I'm going to keep trying to do my best and to be kind and gentle and open-hearted, but maybe I'm not the mess I thought I was. And maybe just that thinking is part of what's getting me in trouble. That shame spiral, that like, I'm afraid I can't do this thing, when actually I've got this, I've got this.
Yeah. That's cool.
As we all do, in fact.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Even
not
with,
just about being secure. We all have got this.
yeah. So if we come back to the results you got, just to be clear, so that listeners clear also is, it sounds like it was very shocking, the results. So the results basically showed you what?
That I was a secure, autonomous adult, and that chances are, and that this is what the science says, with the 75, oops, sorry, Zoom life, that was like my daughter's remote violin class coming through. The science tells us that with 75% predictability, we will raise children with the same attachment pattern as what we have as adults. So when I learned that I was a securely attached adult, chances were that Azalea was secure as well.
Got it. And then one more question about this. What did it say about what environment you grew up in? Did it say anything about that? Was it not so much?
Well, it gets better. It gets better. So chances are good that I would have had a secure childhood, that I would have been a secure, strange situation, because, attachment is not a life sentence. Karma changes, things change, big experiences can change. But generally speaking, there is a propensity for replication of attachment patterns, like anything in life, right? And so when I found this out, and I thought, and I knew the science, and I said, okay, so chances are I was a secure baby, but there's a loophole that there's such a thing that's called earned security, that we develop security as an adult. So then my mom came to visit, and my husband and I had trained in how to administer the adult attachment interview. And so I was like, Mom, have a seat. You're taking the AI. And she was like, oh my God, no. But she did it. And we got her results transcribed and sent to the experts in New York. We didn't obviously, code it ourselves. And she came back totally autonomous, secure, like more than me. So then I had triangulated the data, in every direction. And there was really, if I was going to trust the attachment science, I had to trust that I was a secure adult that came from a secure family.
That's so cool. So yeah, that's mind blowing. I mean,
and you don't even know me. Yeah.
Yeah. Because being a former psychotherapist, it's another story, coach, entrepreneur guy, teaching relationships now, and teaching about attachment, one could jump to the conclusion or make the assumption that because a teenager is, quote, acting out, that they must have an insecure family, right? Or an insecure attachment.
There's a whole thing also about that I learned that's in the book about when a child begins acting out and when they stop. And I stopped being a delinquent, at the end of my adolescence, and that's a whole separate category, apparently. And for girls, it's different also.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan Siegel writes this about in a number of his books, but particularly Brainstorm, around the adolescent brain and what happens and why actually kids need to rebel and sort of, quote, act out. And that can also happen with insecure attachment.
It certainly did with me, if we're going to believe the science. But, so the beautiful thing about this, and I think you'll appreciate this, is that, so it's taken me a long time to figure out, like, okay, what the hell is this about then? If all of those things could still go on in my life, in my early childhood, I had just had a difficult time. My brothers were mean. I had like all this stuff. Then what good is a secure attachment? Then who cares? And I've come to the conclusion through all of this that it was my security that contributed to my passionate search. So even when I was struggling and in these crazy relationships and doing all kinds of crazy things, it was always with a pretty grand passion, ambition, if you will, for connection and for love, and to really be intimate with the world, with myself, with the trees, the people, sex, whomever, whatever, just like a hunger for intimacy. And so that's how I am understanding my version of security. And I'm grateful for that, actually. I feel really fortunate.
Yeah,
and I never give
absolutely.
up. And that's the other thing, grit and determination. When you were asking before, what does a secure person have that a maybe insecure person doesn't have as much, is grit and determination. And that is something I had, even when I was maybe going after unsavory things, nothing could stop me.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's so cool. And you knew how to butter your bread, as you say.
Exactly. Not with a lot of, like wrong-headed, adolescent ideas.
Attitude or ideas.
Exactly. But I thought I knew how to go after what I wanted.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's great. Now, I'm curious how this shows up in your marriage. If I can ask, like, how long have you been married?
Almost 20 years.
Nice. Well done.
Thank you.
And how would you say, as someone who now, understands and self-studied this adult attachment inventory and attachment in general, and your husband's patterns and his upbringing, what meaning have you made of the kind of relationship you have as an adult now after 20 years of marriage?
Yeah, God, that's a really great question. I wrote the book. My original impetus for the book was to understand my relationship with Azalea. As things moved along and she got older and things got easier, and, I started to learn more, and my marriage got, changed, got complicated and beautiful and rich and all the rest of it. A lot of my interests started to sort of morph a little bit to try to understand him and his strange situation and his journey. And, it's led to, he's a psychotherapist, he's a somatic experiencing psychotherapist. So he knows his stuff too. So it's led to a lot of really interesting conversations. Like pretty much every day we're both just like churning and burning this thing through. It's helped me, I've definitely gotten didactic at times, and I've weaponized attachment.
Sure.
Sign.
Yeah, like a lot of personal growth people do. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And he doesn't care for that.
Yeah.
And I don't care for it either, frankly. It's not, it's not nice. So it's a process, it's really been, it's been really, really good for us. And it's given us a lot to think about, and it's helped us understand each other. And, now that, the book is getting integrated in me more and in the world more, and I'm spending more time talking about it, and it's just less of a thing, for me, and attachment is less of a thing. It's more integrated. It's becoming less of a thing in our marriage, and we're moving on now. We're moving on to new territory, and I'm doing some new work, like you mentioned, Kimberly Johnson. I just signed up for her Jaguar training, which I'm super excited about. And I feel like, I'm working on a new book. I'm working on a novel that takes place in a monastery. I'm moving into new territory of things that I want to work out. The attachment work. And we met at the monastery, so that's part of our marriage too. So, we are fortunate. We're very connected. And so we're kind of working out all of our stuff. I'm not sure if that answers the question you're asking.
Yeah, it does. What I'm hearing is that there's a secure attachment here between the two of you. And you have your ruptures, you have your issues, you have your challenges along the way, of course, like any couple does, no matter how great you are, right? And it sounds like there's it's a secure base, if we want to use that language, the Bowlby language, from which you can go kind of live your life, right?
Yeah, actually, the secure base is Ainsworth's phrase, and Bowlby actually gives her credit for that in his book, Secure Base. I just have to give her.
Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome.
That's a good one for me to know, because he's often cited as the person who coined that term.
Yeah, that's wrong. And people always say that she was his student, which is totally wrong. And it was not even her.
It was like his teacher. What's that?
Well, he wasn't his teacher, but they were colleagues.
Sure, but there was probably he was probably in student mode plenty of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as a British gentleman, like, he would go into student mode, but it's actually not even her term. She got it from her PhD advisor. So, but the concept of a secure base is 100% true. And you know what's interesting? So in my book, I dedicate the book to Thera, my secure base, and Azalea, my delight. And because that's what Mary Ainsworth said is at the heart of every secure relationship is mutual delight. And Thera and I have been talking, that's my husband's name, a lot recently about this concept of delight and how what it means is really just being the apple of someone's eye. Sometimes it doesn't even matter, from an attachment point of view, when you're little, like you just have to feel like you're the apple of someone's eye every now and then. It doesn't have to be all the time, but that someone just delights in you. And, and if you think about it like that, it really levels the playing field. But I think that 65% might get a little more reasonable to you. But what's interesting is that when I met my husband at Zen Mountain Monastery almost 20 years ago, and I knew I was going to marry him the minute I saw him. And I had this feeling, I hadn't read a single thing about attachment ever. I'd never heard of Bowlby or Ainsworth, but I had a really strong feeling that I wanted and needed him as my secure base. I didn't use those words, but I really kind of knew this guy is going to help me become who I want to be. And now I understand that was a desire for a secure base in my relationship.
Absolutely, and it's what adult partners do for each other, right? They want to be each other's secure base, and they want to be a champion for what the other person wants to do with their life, right?
Exactly. It can get, complicated. We've been together a long time. He's 6 years younger than I am. We grew up in two totally different environments. So there's definitely a lot of material.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like with any partnership. I'm curious if you're familiar with Ed Tronick's work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's the one who came up with the 50% of the time is good enough.
Yeah, yep. And I mentioned him because earlier on you were talking about the judgment, the self-judgment that so many parents go through. And I think what's so beautiful about the still face and his work is, it's not about the rupture or the disconnection. It's about what do you do afterwards and how do you come back into connection. And security seems to me that people who are interested in this secure base and being there for their child or each other, they come back, right? They come back to make it right again. They come back to reconnect. They come back to find out what went wrong. And sometimes that's a deep journey for a couple. And other times it's just a daily practice, right? Or both.
Totally, or both, and the way that we can do that is by learning how to do that in our own bodies and minds. And so for people who don't have a meditation practice or, a therapy practice or a way that they're used to, learning to recognize their own sensations and their own really deeply interpersonal ruptures, this work is more challenging. And, people always want to know, like, well, what kind of attachment pattern do I or my child have? And can I get a strange situation for my kid? Or where can I get the AAI? And neither of those things is really possible for most people. And, but it doesn't matter in a sense because the antidote to everything is the same. And that is to learn to become more present with ourselves. If we can manage our own internal pain and the ruptures that happen on a daily basis, of our hurt feelings and our confusion and everything that's going on in the world, which is so incredibly anxiety producing. But we can hang in there with our own sensations and watch the ebbs and the flows and forgive ourselves and, work on that intricate level, just a little bit on that sense in our sensations. That's how we do it with other people. If we can't tolerate our own anger, we can't tolerate our child's anger. And we certainly can't tolerate our anger about our child's anger, And so from an attachment point of view, self-care truly is childcare. And, while, manis and petties is great, going on date night, all that is good. When I say self-care, I mean self-study and really learning how to manage and regulate. It's about regulation. Regulate our own feelings so that we can be present for others, because that's the thing that's getting in our way of repair, that we don't have it within ourselves to give. If we can't delight in our own bodies and presence in our own life, we certainly aren't going to be able to delight in someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, as we wind down, just a couple more questions, Bethany. One is, one of our missions here at the Relationship School is to reach a lot of young people with relationship education. And I just think, it would have been so cool if I would have known this stuff, say, in high school, right? So if I were to speak in front of 1,000 teens and I could only share or teach them one thing about relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Oh my God, what a great question. Trust yourself. That would be my, if I have to whisper something short, I would say trust yourself. Yeah.
Would you say trust yourself? And then if you added a relational asterisk by that, what would you add on to trust yourself that was kind of relationship focused?
Well, I would say trust yourself in relationships. That's what I mean. Trust yourself in relationships. You know who is going to butter your bread and who's not. And listen to yourself and listen to what you want, and that you are, you're the one who gets to say, you're the one who gets to feel felt. You're the one who gets to say, when I feel like this is enough, when it's not enough, you're the one who's in charge. It's your show.
Nice. Beautiful. Cool. And last question, where can people find you and The Strange Situation: A Mother's Journey into the Science of Attachment?
Well, it's available at all the bookstores. My website is BethanySaltman.com. I'm on Instagram, Bethany_Saltman. Follow me there. I'm really enjoying that. I've only been on Instagram since the pandemic because I thought it would be a good time to reach readers, and it has been. It's been fun. I'm on Twitter, and I think that's it.
Okay, awesome. Well, Bethany, it's been a treat. I'm glad. Thanks, Kimberly, for introducing us. Yeah,
Thank you.
And thanks for just.
Too.
Your cool.
Story.
Yeah,
And it's all really interesting.
Right on. And I think, again, I just want to appreciate you for being someone who self-studied the attachment stuff and didn't go get the formal PhD or anything. And I find it really interesting to learn from people who self-study and go down a rabbit hole of something and then come out with a book or teachings. And it's just really cool. So a lot of respect for you for doing that work.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, action step. Please go check out BethanySaltman.com and her book, The Strange Situation, right? I think you're going to find that interesting. I have not read it. I let her know that. It looks really interesting to me. She strikes me as a very good writer because that's her jam. And if you're perhaps a mom or a parent that could connect to any part of her story, I think that book sounds really like a good one to me. Cool. And then just a little mini action step. It's kind of like an attachment quiz for yourself. A lot of us, maybe listeners, we get caught up in what's my style and how neurotic am I or how insecure am I. What I want to just say by words of encouragement is you're probably more securely attached than you think, in a way, based on what Bethany shared with us today. And here's how you know. If you can make meaning out of your history and form what Dan Siegel calls a coherent narrative, chances are you're more securely attached than you think. Like Bethany said, just because you acted out as a teen doesn't really mean much about your secure or insecure attachment style. It could, but it might not. And I think it's useful for you, by listening to this podcast alone, if you've cranked through all 300 plus episodes, you're probably starting to make good meaning out of your life. You're actually the kind of person who self-reflects and you wonder about yourself. That's huge, especially if you're going to become a parent someday or a partner someday. It's only going to help your relationships. That's the research. So reflect on that today, all right? And then again, get in a relationship with one other person and basically answer this question. How clear is your story and understanding about your own life? And does that impact your adult relationships right now? Or your parenting if you're a parent? I think this is a really useful exercise to continually reflect on. I share this over and over with our students here at the Relationship School, and so many of them are diving in, making meaning and putting their history together in a story that's basically coherent, that makes sense. The more you can do that, the more secure I think you become. Pretty cool. That's why self-study is so essential and why I'm such a big fan of growth and development. Okay, check us out, relationshipschool.com, and then go to /connected for our 2-day event on conflict. I think it's going to be a juicy one, a tearjerker. There might be lots of laughs, and you can study anywhere in the world and come play with us, okay? Where else are you going to learn conflict in a way that works for you? If you're like my style or what I'm doing here, I would encourage you to come, because I'm not sure you can get that from someone else, especially in a coaching session or two. I'm going to give you the download, right, on how it works. Relationshipschool.com /connected. Okay, guys, make sure you see me on Instagram. Say hello at Jason Gaddis as well, and we'll see you all soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.